The cabin lights had dimmed 3 hours ago, and most of first class had surrendered to sleep. Verity Vance couldn't. She shifted in seat 3A, the leather creaking softly beneath her. The seat had cost more than her monthly rent, a fact she tried not to think about. When her connecting flight got canceled and the airline offered an upgrade as compensation, she'd accepted without hesitation. Now she was regretting it. Not the seat, the silence. In economy, there was always noise. Babies crying, conversations bleeding through cheap headphones, the constant shuffle of bodies in cramped quarters. Up here, the soundproofing was so effective she could hear her own heartbeat, and other things. Like the soft click of keyboard keys from the seat beside her. Verity glanced sideways without moving her head, a skill she'd perfected over 15 years of surveillance work at the FBI. The man in 3B hadn't looked up once since they'd left San Francisco. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone in that carefully calculated way that suggested wealth so profound it didn't need to try. She knew that face. Not personally. From magazine covers, from business news segments she half-watched while getting ready for work. Dante Sterling, founder and CEO of Aegis Quantum, the cybersecurity firm that had just landed a $3 billion contract with the Department of Defense. And here he was, typing away on a laptop like any other business traveler. Except most business travelers didn't have a privacy screen that made their display look black from any angle except straight on. And most business travelers didn't position their bodies to create a physical barrier between their work and the rest of the cabin. Old habits, Verity thought. She recognized the posture because she'd used it herself, countless times when reviewing case files in public spaces. The slight hunch of the shoulders, the angle of the arms, it all created a cone of privacy that discouraged casual observation. But it couldn't discourage someone who wasn't being casual about it. She became aware of it gradually, the way you become aware of someone staring at the back of your head in a crowded room. A prickling sensation at the base of her skull. Someone was watching. Not her, him. Verity reached for the water bottle in her seat pocket, using the movement as cover to scan the cabin behind her. Row 4. 2 seats back on the aisle. The man in 4B appeared to be sleeping, his eye mask pushed up on his forehead, his head tilted against the window. Appeared being the operative word. His breathing was too regular, too controlled. Real sleep had rhythm, variation, the occasional hitch or sigh. This was performance sleep. Her throat constricted. The man in 4B had something in his hand. Small, dark, positioned at an angle that, she knew that angle. She knew what it meant when someone held an object at precisely 45 degrees, aimed at a point 3 feet forward and 6 inches down. It was the optimal position for capturing the laptop screen from behind. He was recording. Corporate espionage. It had to be. Sterling's company had just secured the most valuable defense contract in a decade. The encryption algorithms on that laptop could be worth billions to the right buyer, or the wrong government. And she was watching it happen in real time. Her first instinct was to alert the flight crew. But what would she say? "Excuse me, I think the man in 4B is using a hidden camera to steal classified information from a billionaire's laptop?" They'd think she was insane. Her second instinct was to confront him herself. Flash her credentials, demand he hand over the device. But she was on administrative leave. Her badge was sitting in a desk drawer at Quantico, placed there by her own hand 2 weeks ago after the Harrison case. She had no authority here. No backup. No weapon. What she had was 15 years of training and a brain that refused to stop analyzing even when she desperately wanted it to. Think, Verity. Think. Her eyes fell on the cocktail napkin sitting on her tray table, left over from the gin and tonic she'd ordered 3 hours ago. White paper, blue airline logo, slightly crumpled, low-tech, untraceable, perfect. Verity palmed the napkin, pressing it flat against her leg beneath the tray table's edge. With her other hand, she retrieved her pen, a simple ballpoint, the kind that came free with oil changes. What to write? It needed to be clear enough that he'd understand immediately. Concise enough that he could read it in a glance. Specific enough that he'd know she wasn't crazy. She began to write, keeping her movements small. "Don't turn around. The man in 4B is filming your screen. Camera hidden in his pen. Do not react. Better. Direct. actionable. But how to deliver it? As if the universe had heard her, the plane shuddered. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight attendants, please be seated. We're experiencing some light chop," and the seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft ding. "Now." Verity pushed up from her seat. "Restroom," she murmured to no one in particular, though Sterling glanced up briefly as she moved past him toward the aisle. She walked slowly toward the rear of first class, counting steps. When she reached row 4, she paused, gripping the headrest of the aisle seat to steady herself against the plane's movement. The man in 4B was still feigning sleep. But this close, she could see the slight tension in his jaw, the almost imperceptible movement of his eyes beneath closed lids. He was tracking her. More importantly, she could see the pen. It was clipped to the fabric pocket on the back of seat 3B, positioned exactly as she'd predicted. The design was elegant, expensive, indistinguishable from a high-end Mont Blanc to anyone who wasn't looking for the telltale signs. But Verity was looking, and she saw them. The slightly wider barrel, the tiny pinhole where the lens was hidden. Professional equipment, government grade, probably. She continued to the restroom, locked herself inside, and spent exactly 90 seconds staring at her reflection in the mirror. "What are you doing, Verity?" She was on leave. Officially, she was supposed to be processing and taking time for self-care. Unofficially, she was supposed to be staying out of trouble. Some people never learn. She flushed the toilet for cover, washed her hands, and opened the door. The walk back to her seat felt like it took hours. When she reached row 3, she allowed herself to stumble slightly, not enough to be dramatic, just enough to justify reaching out for support. Her hand landed on the armrest between seats 3A and 3B, and in the same motion she swept the napkin from her palm onto Sterling's keyboard. The paper landed directly on his trackpad, impossible to miss. Verity dropped into her seat, fastened her seatbelt with trembling fingers, and waited. The seconds stretched like taffy. She forced herself to look straight ahead. She could feel Sterling beside her, could sense the moment his typing stopped, the shift in his breathing as he registered the foreign object on his keyboard. "Don't turn around. Please don't turn around." Sterling didn't move. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened at all. Then, slowly, deliberately, she saw his hand reach for the napkin, saw him unfold it beneath the edge of his tray table, keeping the movement invisible to anyone watching from behind. His fingers stilled on the paper. And then Dante Sterling did something she didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't loud, barely more than an exhale, really. But in the tomb-like silence of first class, it might as well have been a shout. Verity's head whipped toward him before she could stop herself. He was looking at her. Really looking, for the first time since she'd boarded. His eyes were darker than she'd expected, with an intensity that made her feel like she was being catalogued. "Don't worry," he said, his voice pitched low enough that it wouldn't carry beyond their row. "I know." Verity blinked. "You? What?" "I know about 4B. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I've known since we left the gate." The words didn't make sense. "But the camera. He's recording. He's recording exactly what I want him to record." Sterling's fingers moved across his keyboard with renewed purpose, and now she could see his screen. He'd angled it slightly toward her, a deliberate invitation. The display showed a complex interface she didn't recognize, filled with cascading data streams. "The document I've been working on for the past 3 hours," Sterling continued, "is a honeypot. Modified code that looks valuable enough to steal, but contains embedded tracking protocols. The moment it's transferred to any external device, it starts reporting back. Locations, network data, user activity, everything. He's using himself as bait. It's not paranoia if they really are out to get you, Miss Vance. Verity Vance. Miss Vance." He typed something, and a new window opened, a feed that appeared to be coming from a security camera, showing the cabin from above. "I have my own surveillance on this plane. Mr. 4B has been on my radar since he booked his ticket 48 hours ago using a credit card linked to a shell company in Singapore." "If you knew," she said quietly, "why didn't you do something about it?" "I am doing something about it." His fingers paused. "Information is more valuable than prevention. If I'd had 4B removed at the gate, his employers would have simply sent someone else, someone I couldn't identify." "And you're comfortable being watched while you do that?" Something flickered behind his eyes, something dark and old. "I've been watched my whole life," he said. "By competitors, by governments, by people who wanted what I had or wanted me to have nothing at all. You learn to use it." "Well," Sterling said, his voice sharpening with interest, "that's unexpected." On the screen, the security feed had been replaced by a text document. Large font, black letters on white background. "Good evening, 4B. Hope you're enjoying the show. Honeypot protocol activated. Uploading tracker now." "You're gonna show him that?" "Already did. 3 seconds ago, I pushed this to every screen in the cabin that's set to channel 4, which includes the personal device Mr. 4B has hidden beneath his blanket." From behind them came a sound, soft but unmistakable. The rustle of fabric, the sharp intake of breath, the frantic tap of fingers on glass. Verity turned. The man in 4B had thrown off his pretense of sleep. He was sitting up now, his face pale in the glow of his phone screen, jabbing at the device with increasing desperation. "It's already too late," Sterling said, not bothering to lower his voice anymore. "The tracker's embedded at the firmware level. Factory reset won't help." The man's head snapped up. His eyes found Sterling's, and Verity saw something she recognized, the look of a predator realizing he'd become prey. Then the man in 4B stood up. He moved with a speed that belied his earlier stillness, stepping into the aisle and walking, not toward the front of the plane, toward the cockpit, but toward the back, toward the emergency exit. "This is a hijacking," he said, his voice thick with an accent she couldn't place. "Nobody move." The scream came from somewhere in the back of economy. The cabin erupted into chaos. "Down," Sterling said, and his hand closed around Verity's arm, pulling her below the level of the seat backs. But Verity was already moving, not down, but forward. She'd seen people react to being cornered before. Most of them panicked. Most of them made mistakes. But this man wasn't heading for the cockpit. He was heading for the rear exit. At 37,000 feet, that door was deadly. He's going to try to open it. Not as an escape. As a weapon. "Sir, step away from the door," Verity called, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Whatever you think you're doing, this isn't the way." He spun toward her. This close, she could see the desperation in his eyes, the sweat beading on his forehead, the tremor in his hands. "Stay back," he said. "You don't understand. If he gets that data to his people..." "The tracker? It's already uploaded. The damage is done." The man's face crumpled. "Then I'm already dead. They'll kill me for failing. They'll kill my family." His hand moved toward the exit handle. "At least this way. I control how it ends." Understanding crashed over Verity like a wave. He wasn't trying to hijack the plane. He wasn't trying to escape. Murder-suicide. The desperate act of a man who saw no other way out. "Listen to me," Verity said, keeping her voice steady. "I know you're scared. I know you think there's no way out, but killing 200 innocent people won't save your family. It'll just give your employers exactly what they want. Chaos, distraction, a tragedy to bury the real story." The man's hand hesitated on the handle. "Think about it. If you're dead, you can't testify. You can't expose them. But if you cooperate, if you tell us who sent you, then you have leverage, something they need to keep quiet, and that means your family has protection." His eyes searched her face. "You're lying. You can't protect anyone. You're just a passenger." "I'm FBI. Or I was." The words came out before she could stop them. "I'm on leave because I made a mistake. I let my judgment get clouded, and someone got hurt because of it. But I've spent 15 years hunting people like your employers, and I know one thing. The only way out is forward. Not through that door." The man's hand was shaking now. Tears streaked down his cheeks. "My daughter," he whispered. "She's 7. "What's her name?" He blinked. "What? Your daughter? What's her name?" A long pause. "May." "May." Verity held his gaze. "I promise you, on everything I am, that I will do everything in my power to keep May safe. But I need you to step away from that door. I need you to trust me." For an endless moment, he didn't move. Then slowly his hand dropped from the handle. FBI agents were waiting on the tarmac when they landed at JFK. Verity had expected to be taken into custody. She'd interfered in a federal investigation while technically suspended from active duty. At minimum, she was looking at a disciplinary hearing. Instead, the lead agent, a woman named Chen with steel-gray hair, shook her hand and said, "Good work, Vance. We've been tracking this cell for 8 months. You just gave us our first solid lead. I was lucky, Verity said. Lucky would have been if the plane hadn't been in the air. This was something else. Chen's gaze shifted to Sterling, who was standing a few feet away, deep in conversation with two men who had NSA written all over them. He's requesting that you be assigned to his protective detail, officially. I'm on leave. Leave can be cut short, especially when someone with your profile makes a request directly to the deputy director. Verity stared at her. What exactly does he want? Chen's expression was carefully neutral. That's something you'll need to ask him. 2 hours later, Verity found herself in the back of a black SUV that probably cost more than her house, being driven through Manhattan streets, just beginning to fill with early morning traffic. Sterling sat beside her, his laptop open on his knees. The silence between them was comfortable, somehow. Like they'd known each other longer than a single night. The man from 4B, Sterling said finally, without looking up. His name is Wei Chen, software engineer from Shanghai, recruited 3 years ago by a state-sponsored hacking group that specializes in industrial espionage. You've already processed his interrogation? I have access to the preliminary transcripts. A ghost of a smile. There are advantages to being the person whose data they were trying to steal. And you want me, why? Because you talked him down. Sterling finally looked up. Wei Chen was seconds away from killing everyone on that plane, and you talked him down with nothing but words and a promise you had no authority to make. I've done it before. Have you? The question hung in the air. Verity thought about the Harrison case, about the 14-year-old girl she'd convinced to drop the knife, only to watch her father step out of the shadows with a gun. About the split second of hesitation that had cost that girl her life. Not always successfully, she said quietly. Sterling closed his laptop, set it aside, turned his full attention to her in a way that made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen. The cell that sent Wei Chen isn't going to stop, he said. The data he was trying to steal, the encryption algorithms, they're the key to a project called Quantum Shield. It's a new framework for securing government communications that would render every existing form of surveillance obsolete. And someone doesn't want that to happen. Several someones. We've identified at least 3 nation-states with both the motive and resources to keep trying. His eyes held hers. What happened on that plane was just the beginning. The implication was clear. You're asking me to protect you. I'm asking you to work with me, not as a bodyguard. I have those, and they're very good at shooting things. I need someone who can do what you did tonight. Someone who can read people. Someone who can find the human angle in what everyone else sees as a strategic problem. You want a profiler. I want you. The words landed with unexpected weight. I barely know you, she said. No, but you trusted your instincts about me on that plane. When it would have been safer to stay quiet and mind your own business, you chose to act. That tells me everything I need to know. It tells you I'm impulsive. It tells me you're brave. His voice softened, and that you care about doing the right thing more than you care about the consequences. Those are rare qualities, Miss Vance. The SUV turned onto a street Verity didn't recognize, pulling up to a building that seemed to be made entirely of glass. The sun was just beginning to hit its upper floors, setting them ablaze with golden light. Where are we? Home, Sterling said. For now, Dante Sterling's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of Quantum Tower. Verity had expected luxury. She'd expected technology. She hadn't expected warmth. The main living area was all soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows, yes, but someone had filled it with color. Burgundy rugs, blue throw pillows, artwork that looked more personal than expensive. Bookshelves lined one wall, stuffed with actual books, their spines cracked and well-loved. A grand piano sat in a corner, sheet music scattered across its closed lid. You play? Verity asked. Poorly. My mother insisted on lessons when I was young. Sterling shrugged off his jacket. The piano was hers. It's one of the few things I kept after she died. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. His voice was matter-of-fact, but something flickered in his eyes. Old grief, carefully managed. They ate breakfast in near silence. Eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, pastries that dissolved on the tongue. Verity couldn't remember the last time she'd had a meal that wasn't microwaved. Halfway through her second pastry, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood turn to ice. The message was from an unknown known number. One word, followed by an image. Watching. The image was a photograph of a young woman leaving a brick building, her arms full of textbooks, her red hair catching the morning light. "My sister," Verity said. The words come out strangled. "Grace. She's at BU studying architecture. They know about her." Sterling was already moving, pulling out his own phone. "I'm alerting my security team. They'll have someone on her within 10 minutes. "How did they? They're trying to pressure you. It's standard protocol. Identify the target's vulnerabilities and exploit them." "My sister isn't a vulnerability, she's a person." "I know." He crossed to her, took the phone from her shaking hands. "Look at me." "Verity? Look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "They sent this message because they want you scared. The best thing you can do for Grace right now is stay calm and help me figure out who's behind this." Verity's hands trembled as she dialed Grace on Sterling's encrypted phone. "V? It's 7 in the morning. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, Gracie. She swallowed hard. "I need you to go to campus security and stay there until you hear from me again. Don't ask questions." A pause. "Verity, you're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. Please, just trust me." Another pause. "Okay, I'm going now. I love you, Gracie. I love you too, V. Stay safe." The call ended. Verity stood in the middle of the penthouse, the phone clutched in her hand, and felt something break loose inside her chest. "I should leave," she said. "Walk away from this. They want me out of the picture." "Fine, I'm out." "That won't protect her." Sterling's voice was gentle but firm. "Pow. They've already identified her as leverage. Running won't save Grace. Ending the threat will." "And how do you propose to do that?" He moved to the wall of windows, touched a panel, and the glass transformed into a massive display screen. Images and data began to cascade across the surface. Photographs, dossiers, network diagrams. Wei Chen's cooperation has given us a starting point. The cell that recruited him is called Red Phoenix. They're a Chinese state-sponsored hacking collective. He highlighted a photograph, a man in military uniform, his face weathered and hard. General Zhang Wei, head of the MSS's Technical Operations Division. He's been obsessed with quantum shield for years, not because he wants the technology for China, but because he wants to ensure no one has it. Why? Because his son died in an American drone strike that used our early encryption protocols to evade detection. The communication that ordered it was completely secure. Zhang Jun never saw it coming. The pieces clicked together in Verity's mind. So this isn't about money or power. It's about revenge. Zhang Wei doesn't want quantum shield stolen. He wants it destroyed, along with everyone associated with its development. She studied the general's photograph. His eyes stared back at her, cold, calculating, consumed by grief that had curdled into something poisonous. She understood that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror. "He's not going to stop," she said. "No." "Then what do we do?" Sterling turned to face her. "We fight back, on our own terms." The attack came on day 4. Not the obvious kind, no drones, no assassins, no dramatic confrontations. This was subtler, smarter. It started with a news article. Tech billionaire Dante Sterling connected to Chinese intelligence sources. The headline hit at 6 a.m., simultaneously appearing on every major news network. Within an hour, Aegis Quantum stock had dropped 30%. Within 2 hours, the Department of Defense had announced a review of their contract. Within 3, Sterling's face was everywhere. Not as a victim, but as a traitor. "Deepfakes," Verity said, staring at the video being shared millions of times. It showed Sterling accepting a briefcase full of cash from a man identified as a Chinese operative. The technology is incredible, because it's military grade. Sterling's knuckles were white where they gripped his desk. "Zhang must have assets I didn't know about." "Can you prove it's fake?" "Eventually. But in the age of social media, eventually doesn't matter. The damage is done the moment the story breaks." Verity watched his face. The tight jaw, the eyes burning with an anger that went far beyond frustration. "You've seen this before," she said. "What makes you say that?" "Because you're not surprised. This is exactly the kind of attack you were preparing for." He didn't deny it. "Zhang's not interested in killing me anymore. He knows I'm too well protected. But destroying my reputation, that's just as effective, and much harder to defend against. So what do? We fight back." He began pacing. "Zhang's entire operation depends on his anonymity. If we can expose him for what he really is, a rogue agent pursuing a personal vendetta, his support will evaporate. You want to out him. I want to burn him. Everything he's built, everyone he's corrupted, every secret he's kept for the past decade. Verity felt a chill run down her spine. And then what? Then he faces justice. Whose justice? The Chinese government won't extradite him? International courts don't have jurisdiction. Even if you expose everything, he might walk away free. He won't walk away. Sterling's voice had gone cold. Not from this. Dante. She stepped in front of him. I've spent 15 years in law enforcement, and I've seen what happens when people decide to take justice into their own hands. It doesn't end well. This is a revenge, isn't it? She held his gaze. Because it sounds like you're about to do something you can't take back, and I didn't sign up to help you destroy yourself. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then something shifted in his expression. The cold fury softened. What would you do, he asked, if it were your life being torn apart? I'd want to burn it all down. I'd want to make them pay for every lie. She paused. But then I'd remember that the moment I became the monster, they'd won. Sterling's jaw tightened. So I'm supposed to just let it go? No. You're supposed to beat them at their own game. Expose Zhang, yes. Destroy his network, absolutely. But do it right. Do it in a way that leaves you standing in the light when it's over. And how do I do that? Verity smiled. A small, determined smile. Let me show you. The Blackwood Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Club. Crystal chandeliers dripped from ceilings designed to make mortals feel small. Marble floors reflected the glow of 1,000 candles. Men in custom tuxedos and women in designer gowns moved through the space like ships under sail. Verity hated it immediately. She'd never been comfortable around wealth. Growing up in Ohio, daughter of a mechanic and a schoolteacher, she'd learned early that money created walls almost impossible to climb. But tonight, she wasn't here to blend in. You look incredible, Sterling murmured as they stepped through the entrance. She did, actually. The emerald green gown hugged her curves and left her shoulders bare. Her hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders. I feel like a fraud, she murmured back. Join the club. That's half of what these gatherings are about. They moved through the crowd, and Verity watched the reactions ripple around them. Whispers, stares. Sterling was the most controversial person in the room, possibly in the entire country. Good. Let them watch. Target acquired, Sterling said softly. Verity followed his gaze. General Zhang Wei stood near the windows, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. He was talking to a senator who sat on the Armed Services Committee. He's not even trying to hide, she said. Why would he? As far as he's concerned, he's already won. Not for long. Sterling squeezed her hand, a brief touch, there and gone. Are you ready? Verity thought about Grace, safe now at a secure facility. She thought about Wei Chen, who had agreed to testify. She thought about all the people Zhang had hurt. Let's end this. At exactly 9:15 p.m., Sterling took the stage. The room fell silent. Good evening, Sterling said. I know many of you expected me to use this time defending myself. I'm not going to do that. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I'm not going to defend myself because the truth is, I'm not the story here. I'm just one of many victims of a massive disinformation operation orchestrated by a single man who believes revenge justifies any means. The screen behind him flickered to life. This is Operation Red Phoenix, a state-sponsored hacking initiative hijacked by a rogue intelligence official for personal gain. The images changed. Surveillance footage from the plane. Wei Chen's hand on the emergency exit handle. 3 days ago, an attempt was made to bring down a commercial airliner carrying 200 passengers. The operative was being manipulated by General Zhang Wei, a man using China's intelligence apparatus to conduct a personal war of revenge. Sterling's eyes found Zhang in the crowd. General Zhang, you're welcome to deny any of this, but before you speak, I want you to know that everything I've just shared has already been sent to every major intelligence agency in the world, including the Ministry of State Security in Beijing. Zhang's face drained of color. Your operation was careful, compartmentalized, but Wei Chen knew about you. He'd seen your face on a video call. He'd received orders directly from your secured line, and when he realized he'd been used, he decided to talk. The screens changed again. Wei Chen's recorded testimony. This is what Operation Red Phoenix really is. Not a Chinese intelligence initiative, a personal vendetta, and the man responsible is standing right there. Every eye in the room turned to Zhang. For a moment, the general didn't move. Then his hand moved toward his pocket. Verity was faster. She crossed the distance in 3 strides, caught his wrist, and twisted. The gun clattered to the marble floor. "General Zhang Wei," she said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom, "you're under arrest." FBI agents flooded through the doors. They surrounded Zhang, secured his weapon, read him his rights while cameras flashed. Verity looked up at the stage, where Sterling still stood. He nodded at her, just once. She nodded back. It was over. 6 weeks later, the airport was crowded with holiday travelers. Verity navigated through the chaos toward Gate 27. She was going home, to Boston, where Grace was waiting, where a new job was waiting, where something like a normal life was waiting. Sterling had offered her a permanent position, head of security for Aegis Quantum, with a salary that would have made her laugh out loud. She'd turned him down. "I'm not corporate material," she'd told him, on their last night in the penthouse, sharing takeout Chinese food on the living room floor. "I'm a Fed. It's who I am." "You're more than that." "Maybe, but I need to figure that out on my own." He'd understood. He'd even helped her negotiate her reinstatement with the Bureau. Full status, no disciplinary action, and a commendation. They'd parted as friends. Maybe something more than friends, but neither of them had been ready to name it. Now, settling into a seat near the windows to wait for her flight, Verity found herself thinking about the night on the plane. How a single decision, to write a note on a napkin, had changed everything. That's when she noticed the man beside her. He was reading a physical newspaper. He wore a well-cut suit, no tie, and he had the kind of face she'd seen on magazine covers. "Fancy meeting you here," Dante Sterling said, folding the newspaper with a smile that was almost innocent. Verity stared at him. "What are you doing here?" "Catching a flight. To Boston. Pure coincidence." His smile widened. "Also, I may have hacked the airline's booking system." "That's stalking. That's thorough." She should have been annoyed. Instead, she found herself laughing. "You're ridiculous." "I've been called worse." The gate agent announced boarding. "First class first, as always." Sterling stood, offered her his hand. "Shall we?" Verity looked at his hand, looked at his face, looked at the future stretching out before her. She took his hand. They walked to the gate together, and when the agent scanned their boarding passes, Verity noticed they'd been assigned seats 3A and 3B. "Did you arrange that too?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." They found their seats. When the cabin lights dimmed, Sterling reached into his pocket and pulled out a cocktail napkin. He wrote something on it, folded it carefully, and slid it onto her tray table. Verity unfolded the napkin. "The man in 3B has been watching you for 6 weeks. He's pretty sure he's in love with you. Dinner when we land?" She looked up at him. He was watching her with an expression that was both vulnerable and hopeful. She pulled out her pen. "Dinner sounds good, but you're buying. And if you ever hack my flight information again, I'm arresting you." He read it, laughed, and reached for her hand. Outside the window, the runway lights began to blur. The engines roared. The ground fell away. And somewhere over the eastern seaboard, 2 people who had found each other through a napkin on a red-eye flight held hands in the darkness and watched the stars come out. And that's where our story ends. 2 strangers who found each other through a napkin on a midnight flight, proving that sometimes the smallest act of courage can change everything. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our family. New stories drop every day, each one more captivating than the last. Until next time, remember, the person beside you might just change your life. See you in the next story.